Hello everyone, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. So this is actually the second video I am doing today. I probably will not have time to post them until a little bit later. It helps if I have a Wi-Fi connection. It helps the videos load a lot faster. I don't do live videos very often, but I would like to do live videos at some point. Maybe once I get over like 1,000 subscribers, I'll do another live feed, and we can have discussions on this channel. But the last time I did a live video, I think I only had like 6 people at most pop in, which is fine because I hadn't announced that I was doing one or anything. But the weird thing is that it took like a whole day for that video to even upload to YouTube. It took a really long time, so I don't see myself doing any live feed stuff for a while. So let's get into it. In this video, this is going to be a response to JP talking about the symbolism of Pink Floyd. Now, I discussed the album cover in the last video, so if you want to hear about the symbolism of the Dark Side of the Moon album cover, go ahead and check out my last video. I was also talking about the original Golden Dawn documents and the importance of the invoking pentagram ritual versus the banishing. I discussed that in detail in the prior video, so go ahead and check that one out first. I went ahead and covered the symbolism of the Dark Side of the Moon album cover. And I talked a little bit about Pink Floyd playing at some interesting places, like they have a concert that was in Pompeii, I think. I don't know the details around that ancient site, but that's kind of an interesting place that they played. I'm sure there's some ancient civilization connection with that place. So Pink Floyd, you know, with their songs and their symbolism and how popular they've become, they've obviously had connections, you know, to some degree. And really, wow, that's annoying. I'm going to try to reduce that sound a little bit. You know, bands that get to that degree of success, it's not even just the music at that point, it's the whole merchandise and the franchise of it. You know, you see Dark Side of the Moon t-shirts everywhere. That's really more how bands make their money. Yeah, they make money on tour, they make money from the albums, but I think like merch is a lot of like where the money really comes from. And for me personally, as a musician, I've never been real big on the business side of music. So if I really wanted to be famous and successful, I would need more of a manager, a managerial person, a person who works on the connections. And you know, having a sound guy and all that and the right setup, the right sound setup, is like half the battle in music. You could be the best damn musician ever and like be set up to a not so good sound system and nobody would recognize your talent because your talent's not being showcased properly. So that's just a little side note to the Pink Floyd symbolism. Since we're talking about music, since we're talking about the popularity of bands, sound science is half the battle. It's really a big part of it. If I ever play a show at a venue that doesn't have their own sound guy, which it's really nice when they do have their own sound guy, because they already have somebody who's familiar with the acoustics of the place, they know the right volume, they know the proper levels to set everything at. But typically, I play a lot of places that don't have a sound guy, so I have to hire somebody to bring sound equipment in, and that's usually half the money I make right there from a show, if not more, is to pay the sound guy. So there's just a lot of like politics and stuff that goes into doing the music. I'm just the guy who likes to get up there and play the music. I really don't give a shit about the whole business aspect of it. Maybe that's part of why I've never been really like successful, because it requires a team. It requires, a real band works like a company. You know, there's all kinds of people and connections that have to be made. Whether these popular bands are practicing magic or if they have connections with really rich, I'll call them quote Illuminati types, because just because you have money and monetary power does not mean you are Illuminati. It doesn't mean you're actually illuminated. It just means you have some understandings of some principles and you've been able to use that in your favor for wealth, fame, and success. Me personally, I never really wanted to become famous. I just wanted to be kind of like more of a local, more local fame. Because when you start getting really, really famous and millions of people start wanting your attention and your music, you're attaching yourself to a lot of energy. A lot of attention and focus is drawn onto you that if you are a real practitioner, that may not really be in your best interest. Because remember, silence is secrecy. Silence is power. Of course, silence has its analogies with secrecy, but silence truly is power, especially when it comes to manifesting things. You don't ever tell people your real goals or plans until they're already manifested. But that's getting off track. So let's go to the Dark Side of the Moon album to begin with. Actually, before we touch on that, if you're familiar with earlier Pink Floyd albums like Piper at the Gates of Dawn, that's the first album. I liked that album when I was younger, and I still do. I haven't heard it in a while. But you've got like Lucifer Sam on that album, and that's talking about a cat, I guess, that has some connection to Lucifer. Like I already said, I haven't done research on the occult significance of these songs. I'm just going to do my own analysis. But Syd Barrett was the original vocalist and guitar player for Pink Floyd, and he was kind of really a loopy, wacky dude. I think he did a lot of mind-bending substances that actually, it actually ended up in his downfall and his own detriment. And that's what the song Shine On You Crazy Diamond is about on the Wish You Were Here album. That's probably what the song maybe even Wish You Were Here has some significances with that. Syd Barrett and his mental illness. And, he shaved his eyebrows at one point. You'll see that in the Pink Floyd movie, The Wall. The character Pink or Pinky, I forget what his name is, but he's inspired from Syd Barrett, their original vocalist. At some point along the line, they got David Gilmour, and then there were like 4 or 5 albums, I want to say, including some live ones before Dark Side of the Moon ever came out. But Dark Side of the Moon is the album I want to focus on the most, because that one seems to have the most kind of esoteric-y vibe, in my opinion. Now, like I said, I haven't gone into many of the other albums. I haven't, broken down this stuff. Now, the album Animals, which came after Dark Side of the Moon, I'm pretty sure, is based off of, it's the whole idea of the book, what's that book called? Animal Farm? Where there's different characters like the horse and the pig, and they actually symbolize, different figures in society. Like the corrupted politicians would be the pigs. The horses are the ones who are like worked to death. So those would be like the physical, the manual laborers, maybe the operative builders of society. Are they can be manipulated by the more political people into doing their will, and basically draining them of their life force and essence, and all of these like communistic themes and all of these things are, look into the book Animal Farm. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, if you want to get more insight into the album Animals. But like I said, Wish You Were Here is one of my favorite albums too. That was the album immediately after Dark Side of the Moon. I'd have to say that's probably my second favorite Pink Floyd album next to Dark Side of the Moon. Shine On You Crazy Diamond, the first part that's at the beginning of the album and the one that's at the end of the album, I love that song. The whole thing is really, really cool. And then you've got like Have a Cigar and Wish You Were Here, which you can pretty much understand Wish You Were Here's lyrics if you just listen to the song. I don't know what the significance of the guy who's shaking the hand of a flaming man on the front of the album, like the dude's actually on fire. Not sure what the significance of that is, if that's supposed to be like his shadow self, or if it represents somebody else or what that is. So for this video, like I said, I'm going to focus on Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd has many great albums, but Dark Side of the Moon is the most iconic. As I already said, we talked about the symbolism of the album cover in the last video. Let's go ahead and, I'm going to try to remember the names of all the songs. So, Dark Side of the Moon, I think I don't even think the first song is called Pulse. There's an intro song, and then it goes into the song Breathe. And that song just starts out with, like a heartbeat. You could think of that as the heartbeat of the universe. You know, everything has this primordial, it almost has like this primordial vibe about it. And you can hear different themes from all the different songs kind of playing in that intro. You can hear the clocks going off from the song Time. And then it goes into Breathe. So there's some significance to breathe. Breathe, breathe in the air. Don't be afraid to care. Leave, but don't leave me. Run around, choose your own ground. So it's starting to get into life experiences. And we know that the breath is essential in the occult, especially if you're a practitioner of the Eastern traditions. We know that the breath is vital. In meditation, it was the logos, or the word, or the breath of life that God or the creator or source breathed into existence to create mankind. Breath really is the gift. It's the gift of life. And it makes a reference to the rabbit. There could be some connection to Alice in Wonderland. You know, if you play Dark Side of the Moon next to, I think it's like the Wizard of Oz, and there's some other analogies too. If you play Dark Side of the Moon alongside Majora's Mask, it actually lines up perfectly with the beginning of that game. Same with the Wizard of Oz movie. There's a lot of different video games and things I've played Dark Side of the Moon along to, and it fits perfectly. I'll never forget this. I went on a run a long time ago, because I used to run a lot, like miles a day. I used to do like 5 miles every day. That was, that's like a decade ago now. But I remember getting home at just the time where the song ended, and it was like, home again. That part. I think it's at the end of Time, when it goes into Great Gig in the Sky. So I thought that was really cool. Here to warm my bones beside the fire. That part. So that was interesting. So we've got Breathe. I can't remember what the intro song is called, what it's titled, but it's based around that heartbeat, the primordial heartbeat. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And all life has that heartbeat. It shares that heartbeat. You have Breathe, which talks about kind of the labors of life too. And there's a lot of reference to the sun. You'll notice the sun going up, the sun coming down. Time really seems to be a major theme of the whole album, not even just the song Time itself. But the third song after Breathe is On the Run. And this could just be analogous to the day-to-day activities. I think it shows a guy, like, I've seen videos where he's like in an airport or something. You get like those helicopter kind of sounds. At the time, the first time I heard the album, it really didn't even connect with me, Dark Side of the Moon. I was like, what the hell am I listening to? What is this? But it's important to remember that all of those things were they were the pioneers of a lot of new things, like the synth sounds. There were not a lot of people using synthesizers to make unique sounds, so a lot of those things were new, original ideas that were kind of being mainstream for the first time. So On the Run's just kind of this, it's actually a loop that he does on the synthesizer. I watched the Dark Side of the Moon documentary once, and he shows how it works. He just taps it into the synthesizer, and then he speeds it up, and it plays that on a loop. So that song just seems to be about, being on the run, getting into life's experience. And then Time is the fourth track, and that's really where, the symbolism of time. The sun is racing around to come up behind you again. The sun is the same in a relevant way, but you're older, shorter of breath, and one day closer to death. So that's the thing with every breathing moment, going into the theme of the song Breathe, our life is going by. And I'm going to throw some Masonic symbolism into the mix, and let me know how that, when you read the lyrics of Time or you listen to the song, think about that. One of the symbols is the hourglass, and this is a symbol that's talked a lot about in the Master Mason degree, the third degree of Freemasonry. And you see this symbol used a lot, even in shows like The Days of Our Lives. It's a soap opera. They use the hourglass because the sands are always running. And so it's good to be conscious of that. The ticks on the clock, the sands of the hourglass. It's really a lesson to be aware that to make good use of your time. Don't let the sands of time run out. Don't be focused on the sands. Don't just sit there and stare at the sand trickling down, because then you're losing the whole purpose of your life. If you're living in a state of fear, worrying about death, then you're not enveloped in your life's purpose. Because we all have a state of transition at some point. That's one of the great things that the third degree teaches you, is that death is just this temporary state. That source will ultimately, it's just a phase. It's just like another initiation into another state of being. It's evolution. It's change. It's not really death. Death is really just transformation from one state of being to another. None of us just really know exactly how that operation works, but if you study spirituality, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. So the hourglass is one of those symbols. And something they mention too is that the sands sometimes are trickling so slow you can't perceive of it if your sands are full, but that it is trickling over time. Another symbol is the sigh, which, if you know what a sigh or a sickle is, it's like death holds the sigh. He holds the sickle in his hands, the personification of death. I'm sure there's some connection with Samael there, the archangel of death. And he also has his own sphere on the Klipothic tree. But this is it talks about, well, it doesn't really mention this in the degree. You kind of have to study spirituality on your own a little bit more. See, that's the thing with a lot of Masonic symbols that people don't realize is you're only going to get one explanation of the symbols, but the symbols have hundreds, if not thousands, of different meanings, and they mean different things to different people. So it's talking about the astral cord as being cut off from life. If you've ever heard of the three sisters, Fate, Fortune, and I can't remember what they are. They're showcased in the movie Hercules, the Disney movie Hercules. It's the three kind of dark sisters, and one of them is Fate, and she takes the scissors and cuts the cord. That's what that whole symbolism is about. So it's the astral cord, and it's telling us, that you're not alone in this. You're going to go back to the place, where your forefathers. Basically, we all have to go across this level of time. It's the undiscovered river of time, and this also has some analogy to Dante as well. There's a lot of river symbolism in Dante if you've ever read the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. River symbolism is quite prominent. But the sigh of time, all of these different things that can happen in life, people get so prideful. They get so caught up in their ego and their pride. But the symbolism of the sigh is that it will cut you down. Just like the fields are cut down, when somebody goes to farm, or they're clearing away what do they call it, removing the you remove the negative parts, the chaff from the wheat or something like that. I'm not saying that right, but you get where I'm going with that. So draw your own conclusions to that, and Father Time, and of course the Sigh has connections with Kronos and all of that. Actually, I have my Masonic book here. I think that pretty much covers. I'm just trying to cover some symbolism on time and death, because those are all very prevalent themes in the song Time by Pink Floyd, is what it's all coming back to. And of course the sprig of acacia, which represents immortality or resurrection. And the sprig of acacia actually there's a connection between that and DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And you can read about that really interesting connection in P.D. Newman's. He's a 32nd degree Freemason. Alchemically Stoned, The Psychedelic Secrets of Freemasonry. I think that's the full title of his book. He's a great guy, really down-to-earth dude. I'm pretty sure he's on Facebook. You can go check him out. I don't know that he has his own YouTube channel, but I talk to him every now and again, just through Messenger. Really good dude. So those are some symbols to do with death and, the whole song Time. So I'll let you do your own analysis on that. Then we transition from, a somber song into, and I will add, it says the guy's kicking around on a piece of ground in his hometown. A lot of people get caught up and they just stick to their hometown their whole lives. They don't get to go out and go explore. So really you can be dying in your life. You could be dead even though you're not dead, because you're in a vibration where you're not in alignment with your highest self. So really hell or death can be experienced in a negative way, in a non-transformational way, or a stagnant way, or you're feeling stagnant to where your soul's not growing, you're not evolving, and that's the negative form of death. That's the negative form of death, is where you've kind of given up. You don't want to follow your aspirations, you're just kind of giving in to what everyone else wants you to do. You have to follow your life's purpose. So I wanted to add that too. Great Gig in the Sky is the next song, and that's really more of a spiritual song, because at the end of time he's talking about what is it? I'm trying to remember the lyrics without looking them up. It talks about going away to the island to hear the bells toll, to hear the softly spoken magic spell. So literally, it's almost like a religious song. It's talking about all the people going to these different institutions and trying to get some kind of, whether they go to church or whatever, and get some kind of peace of mind about death. And I think it's cool that there's not any lyrics in that song. It's literally just a girl that's just doing vocal stuff the whole song. And I used to have a friend that could actually do that whole song, like all the high notes and stuff. I could probably pull that off in my own way, because I can do a lot of falsetto, but it might sound pretty funny, It definitely would not sound like the original person, but I can hit crazy notes like that. You might be a little surprised. So that song's more like a spiritual, like church, I think it's referring to like the church bells and the comfort that comes with understanding death, trying to find some consolation to death. The next song I believe is Money. Of course, that song is just based all around like the greed that comes with money being the root of all evil. And that's a mixed subject, because money in and of itself is not evil, it's simply a tool. That's a long-ass discussion. That's if I wanted to talk about how I really feel about money and all of its aspects. I don't think that it's evil inherently, especially if you read Ayn Rand's works. She actually speaks of money in a positive light, and I actually really like her views on it. But of course we know that money is abused all the time, so it's a tool that's mostly used for not good purposes, most of the time. it seems to be the case. It leads to corruption. It's not money that's the root of all evil, it's the hunger for money. Power only for the sake of power. Not gaining personal power to use it in a self-transformational way, or to spread or illuminate other people and spread awareness and consciousness, but using it solely to gain more power for no reason other than that. And if you're only seeking wealth for wealth's sake, a lot of people get into the occult and stuff for that purpose. You're just going to be disappointed, because when you get deep enough in your studies, you're going to see how superficial all that is. I'm not saying that it's superficial to use money as a tool to empower your life and get you to a point where you want to be, where you're financially independent. That's awesome. But I'm talking about using money in a way that you only are fixated on physical things. If you're wanting to get into the occult only for nice things, you will be severely disappointed. So money is just talking about the general greed of money and stuff. I'm not going to get too deep into the symbolism of that song. The next one is Us and Them, I think is the next song. That's a really deep song. That's talking about different polarities, different sides, yin and yang, us and them. It's the whole reason why the world's at war anyway. It's kind of like a war song. Seeing everything as dualistic, seeing it as me and you, us and them, good, bad, right, wrong. And that's what leads to almost all the conflict in the world, is people not being able to unify and reconcile things. So they go to war over it. They argue about it. Which one's black and white, it says, and in the end, who knows who's right and who's wrong. And in the end, it's only round and round and round, talking about the karmic wheel, the wheel of samsara. So I can't remember all the lyrics in that song, of course, off the top of my head, but that's a really great song. It's one I didn't like as much when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I kind of get the idea of it. And my dad, he always told me that, basically the theme of Dark Side of the Moon, it's all about life anyway. It's about all the different aspects of life. It touches on a little bit different themes about life in general, and gives you a more spiritual, overarching view on a lot of things. So Us and Them, it's all about duality and conflict that is, caused from that. And honestly, these things have their role and their purpose on the physical plane. Like war, a lot of people want to be anti-war, but even, I'm a pacifist myself. I think that it's kind of dumb. But even Albert Pike says that it has its purpose. And I think, really, you want to get really deep into some esoteric knowledge, you need to go and check out Universal Mastery's video on Thamael, which is the very last. It's either the bottom of the Clipothic tree or the top, depending on which way you're looking at it from, but it's the anti-pole to Kether. And that is the pole that's inherent duality. It's Moloch and Satan. They're the two warring beings in that sphere. And that's really, it's kind of this beast that rules this, it's this dualistic beast which actually rules this plane of existence. That's the power that is controlling the matrix right now. And only those who can overcome that inherent duality and see past the illusion of it can really gain the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding. So go and check out Universal Mastery's Thamael video. That's some of the most deep esoteric knowledge that there is out there, period. He has some great videos. He really does. That's really breaking down this stuff, even if you're not an occult person, to an everyday person's a way that they could understand it. So Thamael is like this beast. It's the double-headed eagle, which Thamael is kind of the negative polarity version of that, and then Hokmah and Bina being the twin heads, with Kether being the crown on the top of the eagle, or the double-headed phoenix. That would be the positive polarity version of this beast. If you've ever read Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, he talks about how war serves as a function, as reconciliation to some degree. And on the cover of that book is the double-headed eagle, the double-headed phoenix. We see this symbol everywhere. We see it on cigarette packs. But that's what it is. It's the beast that creates war. Why do you think on the left hemisphere of the world, on this side of the world, the Americas, we have like the Christianity. It's that whole ancient like battle between like the warriors of quote-unquote light and the quote-unquote darkness. Christianity and Islam on one side of the world. Christianity kind of prevails over here. On the other side of the world, you have the Eastern religions. So these are two hemispheres on the globe, or two sides of the same thing, really. And each one sees the other side as its enemy. That right there, that's really what Thamael and the double-headed eagle is. It's people defending their side so vigilantly that they're willing to kill the enemy of the other side, when in fact they're both sides are like trying to do almost the same exact thing. It's like different versions of the same thing. So that's super interesting. I think that covers us and them pretty well. I want to say Any Color You Like is the next song. I may be getting these out of order a little bit. That song's just an instrumental, but once again, we talked about the symbolism of colors with the pyramid and how those could represent the light spectrum. Talked about this in the prior video, and the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, the different colors of the Sephiroth emanating from the original light. And that would actually make sense if white is the absence of all color, that it's coming from the ion or the no thing. So that, Any Color You Like is an instrumental. I think Brain Damage is the next one, and this talks about, like, basically it's almost like a mental asylum type song, but it really, anybody who knows people who have gone through some kind of, they've been in like a psych ward, or they've gone too far when it comes to experimenting with, like substances or whatever, can totally have mental breakdowns and literal brain damage. And they talk about who's the lunatic on the grass, but I think that song really has a lot to do with facing your own personal shadow and seeing that you really are the fool. My friend once told me that we're supposed to be the Fool tarot card the whole time, and the Magician. The Magician card is like the will. I think is he holding the wand or is he holding the sword? The wand would be fire, which equates to the will. And if he's holding the sword, maybe it's the sword. The sword is the element of air, so that's the intellect, and that's the beginning of the initiatory journey, in a way, right after the Fool. But you have to go through the phase of the Fool first. The Fool's, when you go into a new endeavor or anything like that, the Fool doesn't know. He's not looking, he's about to walk off the edge of the cliff. But a real master knows how to also be the Fool the whole time and not take things too seriously. So I think that has some analogy with the song Brain Damage. And I'm sure that song was inspired by their original vocalist Syd Barrett as well, I'm sure. And then the album concludes with Eclipse. I think that's the name of the last song. And that actually is funny because I was at a music festival back in like 2017 or so. It was called Eclipsia, and some band played the whole Dark Side of the Moon album, I think from beginning to end, at that show. So that was cool that they did that, because this was when the solar eclipse took place. That was a really interesting event. Things have kind of changed since that eclipse. That was kind of a turning point for the energy on this planet, I think. So that's just a cool little side note. But Eclipse, the last song, is it's a summary of everything. All that you touch and all that you feel, all you see, everyone you meet, all those things. It's the culmination of everything. All your life's experiences are you. It's who you are. It's what you were meant to experience in this plane of existence. The summation of the summarizing or the summation of all your experiences into one, and then that's how the song ends. What are the last lyrics of that song? And then the sun is eclipsed by the moon. There's a very esoteric, okay, so the solar energy, we could do a whole video about the symbolism of the sun, the solar energy, how it represents it's symbolic of Tiphareth, and what that means, the solar masculine energy. The sun is eclipsed by the moon, which is the feminine, the female energy. And of course, dark side of the moon, Gamaliel, as we discussed before. So, alright guys, I think that pretty much wraps it up. So I've got a little bit of driving left. Think I might do some singing in the car. So, wanted to get this video out there. Wow, this is a 35-minute video. Sweet. So, I hope you find some enjoyment and learn something from this video. And as always, thank you for subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please give the video a like, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And as always, peace and blessings. Hope your day goes well, day or night, wherever you are. And I will see you on the flip side. Peace.